gentlemen, boys and girls, everyone around the world, welcome back to another video, where today we are here with this case so disturbing and horrified the police. Now, I don't really get horrified, so I've seen my fair share of live leak videos, alright? So I can't get horrified that easily, so let's see if it's really all that true.
This case takes place in the UK on the 2nd of July 2022. Meet Thomas Campbell. Thomas was born in Manchester between 1983 and 1984.
Okay.
He became the focus of a high criminal investigation in the United Kingdom in 2022. A case of betrayal and a professionally planned and brutal crime. Thomas's adult life was heavily defined by his involvement in serious criminal activity, spanning more than over 2 decades. His first arrest came in the year 2002 at the age of just 19. He was sentenced to 9 years in prison.
That's a 19-year-old?
That's a woman?
At the age of just 19, he was sentenced to 9 years in prison for his role in a violent conspiracy to rob, during which he was found to wield a samurai sword. Following his release from prison...
Wait, what?
During which he was found to wield a samurai sword. Following his release from prison in 2008.
Bro fucking saw Demon Slayer and saw water breathing.
Having served 6 years, Thomas reconnected with an old friend from childhood called Colleen. Colleen and Thomas were the same age in school. Colleen Campbell grew up in Clayton, East Manchester, and was raised by her mother in a single-parent household. Her father had been absent from her life since she was 5, as he was imprisoned on illegal substance-related charges. Colleen and Thomas reconnected during a night out, and their relationship quickly flourished. By this time, Thomas was already known for his criminal activities, with a reputation built on past convictions. But this didn't deter Colleen. She was accustomed to criminality. In 2010, Colleen gave birth to their first child together. It was a baby boy. Despite becoming parents, Thomas's criminal activity persisted.
Damn.
That very same year, he was convicted
My boy couldn't leave the thug life.
of possession with intent to supply. This minor charge marked the beginning of a deeper involvement in drug-related offences. Despite the conviction, Thomas's and Colleen's relationship grew even stronger, and the couple married on the 21st of June 2011. They settled in Colleen's hometown of Clayton, East Manchester. By 2013, Thomas Campbell had become a prominent figure in an organised crime network, focusing on illegal substance distribution. But from 2010 to 2021, police intelligence had linked him to illegal substance trafficking. However, Thomas always maintained the public image of a successful fitness instructor and attempted to cover his tracks well. He regularly hid his money and illegal substances underground in buried places, making sure that he had very little on his premises. He also routinely checked for car tracking devices on his car. One time, he even found a tracking device and confronted the police with it at the station. Thomas and Colleen appeared to enjoy the high life, often jet-setting to luxury destinations. One report highlighted that they spent £10,000 on a 10-day holiday to Cancun, where they travelled in premium seats and stayed at a 5-star hotel. Their social media profiles were filled with photographs of these excursions, capturing moments with dolphins, cocktails, tigers, and boat trips. They drove fancy cars and wore expensive clothing and jewellery. All of this raised suspicion. The story was that Colleen worked part-time at a clothing store and received working tax credits from the government, whilst Thomas was officially registered as a self-employed fitness instructor. It was blatantly obvious that their income far exceeded their official earnings. This of course attracted the attention of the authorities. Between 2009 and 2015, Thomas is believed to have earned over £100,000 through illegal activities. And so their house was raided in March of 2015. And their cars were seized on suspicion of money laundering. The couple were then found to have connections to convicted dealers. The two were convicted in 2019. They were allowed to enter a guilty plea deal, advised by investigators to some degree. Thomas received a 2-year prison sentence, and Colleen's punishment was a 2-year suspended sentence, meaning that she served no jail time. The disparity raised questions, but it is believed that the decision was influenced by the potential impact on their children if both parents were put behind bars, and with this in mind, Colleen was spared. Colleen remained committed to their marriage, visiting Thomas regularly whilst he was imprisoned. However, Thomas grew increasingly paranoid, suspecting that she was being unfaithful during his absence. The otherwise good relationship soon became toxic. Upon his release, Thomas confronted Colleen with accusations of infidelity, further leading to their deterioration. He moved out of their home to a city centre apartment, but the conflict continued. Things got so bad that they both reported each other to the police. Colleen accused Thomas of attacking her, placing tracking devices on her car, and making repeated threats. In turn, Thomas claimed that she had damaged his property, threw objects at him, and verbally abused him. Despite these accusations, neither pursued legal action, and the police took no further steps. This went on for some time, until their marriage ultimately ended when Colleen accused Thomas of having an affair. The betrayal was too much. She later said that she could have handled an affair with a stranger, but not with someone close to her. The female involved was her very best friend. In a fit of rage, she smashed her former best friend's car up, and she was later arrested for causing criminal damage. Finally, in 2021, Colleen and Thomas finally filed for divorce. Colleen once left Thomas a text message saying, "Karma is best served cold, and I can be the coldest MF you ever meet." Following the separation, Thomas remained heavily involved in criminal activities, operating under the radar using EncroChat, an encrypted messaging platform favoured by organised criminals. It was widely believed to be untraceable by law enforcement, earning the nickname WhatsApp for Criminals. However, this belief was shattered when authorities discovered a way to access the encrypted messages, leading to a wave of arrests of criminals. As news of arrests linked to EncroChat spread, Thomas grew increasingly concerned that his own criminal dealings might be exposed. In an attempt to avoid detection and prosecution, he decided to leave the United Kingdom. Initially, he moved to Marbella and then Spain, before relocating to Dubai. But Thomas soon returned to the UK, settling in Greater Manchester, where he bought a £350,000 townhouse and moved in with a new partner. The reason why Thomas returned to the UK was because he wanted to maintain a relationship with his children. Thomas and Colleen made amends and agreed to be amicable, and they agreed to co-parent, scheduling visits and ensuring that Thomas spent quality time with his kids. Despite their turbulent past, they presented a united front at events, trying to give the children a sense of normality. But, little did Thomas know, Colleen was not exactly happy that he was moving on with another woman, and she maintained a desire for revenge, as she had previously threatened. And not only that, the new woman that Thomas was dating was not just any woman. She was the ex-partner of another criminal. A man who the Greater Manchester Police declared was heavily involved with large supplies of Class A's into Manchester. To Thomas, this man was a rival. His name is John Belfield, and John was not happy with his ex's relationship with Thomas. This was made clear by a text message that he had sent to her once he became aware of their relationship. John sent a message saying, "You and that helmet will get domed. You will never have a boyfriend. You will have to move country. Give it a week and you will see why and what happens when you take the piss. Why would I ever respect you when you're seeing Tom Campbell?" John wanted revenge, and so did Colleen. However, they were not acquainted. Yet. On Saturday, the 25th of June 2022, Colleen received a follower request from John Belfield. The very next day, on the 26th, she browsed his account and liked a photograph, thinking that he was just an admirer. But John had an ulterior motive. He knew Colleen's past and the relationship with Thomas, and he wanted information. Colleen and John communicated extensively, exchanging 35 phone calls and 68 messages. The two were fueled with resentment. Colleen and John quickly formed a bond, realizing that they were united by a common purpose: revenge. He was seeking revenge on his ex and looking to punish a competitor, and Colleen wanted karma served cold. So, according to their statements, they decided that they were going to rob him. The plan was to find out where Thomas Campbell hid his wealth, jewellery and illegal substances, both inside his house and in the buried locations. Colleen's decision to team up with a dangerous criminal like John and plot such a violent act against the father of her children was a reckless miscalculation. Whether she fully understood what was about to unfold remains uncertain, but her involvement in such a dangerous scheme and her sheer naivety are truly shocking. On the 27th of June, John made his first move. Colleen informed John that Thomas was on his way to pick up their daughter from school. To execute their plan, John enlisted the help of 29-year-old Rhys Stephen and 39-year-old Stephen Cleweth. While John watched from his car, Rhys and Stephen approached Thomas's vehicle and discreetly placed a tracking device on it. Colleen had provided critical information, sending a message to John describing which exactly would be his vehicle. John and Stephen then used the tracker to follow Thomas and scope out his home. As they planned their next steps, John messaged Colleen again, asking for the house number, further involving her in the plot to track and target her ex-husband. She messaged, telling John that the number was 17. Several hours later, John came back to the house, but this time with Rhys. This was to point out which house belonged to Thomas. Colleen and John had yet to meet in person, but that soon changed when they arranged to meet by her beauty salon. Colleen stepped away from her business to meet John on a nearby street, where they both sat in her vehicle. During this meeting, John showed Colleen his mobile phone, which displayed the tracking location of Thomas Campbell, thanks to the device that had been placed on Thomas's car. Now, while the exact details of their conversation in the car remain unknown, it is clear from the subsequent events that John had formulated a plan, and Colleen, by all indications, was complicit, or at least accepting of what was about to follow. That night, John and Stephen returned to Thomas's home, waiting for him to come back. At 11:26 p.m, they watched as Thomas came home and unlocked his front door. Shortly after, John sent a chilling message to Colleen, saying the word tomorrow. The plan was now figured out. The following day, on the 30th of June, John arrived at Thomas's house with his men in place. The aim was to jump Thomas and find out where his money was kept. However, this turned into a failed dress rehearsal. Instead of entering his house as expected, Thomas had taken his dog for a walk, causing the conspirators to abort their initial plan. Although the respite was brief, as Thomas was stalked again 2 days later. On the 2nd of June 2022, the team was finally ready. However, John's carefully orchestrated plan hit an unexpected snag. Stephen Cleweth, who was supposed to be the driver in the team, was unreachable, having disappeared on a bender at a swingers club in Rochdale. Frustrated by his lack of commitment, John messaged him, expressing that he was disappointed at being let down. But John was sick of being patient. He was not going to allow another failed attempt. And so, John asked a 50-year-old member of his family, named Cal Murphy, to help out. It must be stated that Cal had no idea why John required a lift, or what the men in his van were going to do that evening, making him an innocent person in this case.
Damn.
Cal Murphy agreed, and in his Vauxhall van that night were John Belfield, Rhys Stephen.
So they just got this old guy, probably a grandpa or like a fucking aunt, a fucking uncle or some shit, bro. And he's like, hey, can you pick me up at this time? Like, bro, you're a fucking asshole, bro. He doesn't even know.
And another man who remains unidentified to this day.
Oh, you're
They
an
parked
asshole.
right next to Thomas's townhouse in the driveway of a neighbouring house. They even knew that the neighbouring house was to be vacant, and there they waited. The plan was so carefully thought out and executed with such precision that they didn't have to wait long. Just 5 minutes later, Thomas arrived at his front door. As he inserted his key into the lock, he was suddenly attacked from behind. CCTV footage from a neighbouring property captured the brutal moments at Thomas Campbell's doorstep as he desperately tried to fend off his 3 attackers, screaming for help. However, this was not a simple fistfight, as the attackers were armed.
Fuck.
During the violent struggle, Thomas endured 40 seconds of relentless punches, kicks, and multiple stab wounds. As he became visibly blooded and could no longer fight back, the attackers dragged him inside his own home, and just what followed was even more horrific. Thomas was stripped naked and nothing left on but his socks. His ankles were tied up with duct tape so he couldn't move. All the while, blood was spraying from his body, as evidenced by the spray marks which covered his house throughout the hallway. The exact details of who did what are unknown. However, the robbers began to ransack the house in search of money and illegal substances. John began looking for 2 Rolex watches. Meanwhile, one of the men began torturing Thomas. Perhaps for information, or perhaps fueled by jealousy and hatred. They continued to beat him, punch him, stab him, stamp on him, and even cut a gash on his arm large enough to kill him. They then laid him on the floor and proceeded to pour boiling hot water all over his genitals.
What the fuck?
In a method of inflicting more pain and complete humiliation, they flipped him over onto his front and poured boiling water on his buttocks. This horrific ordeal lasted for 2 hours and totaled a staggering 61 injuries. Once the attackers had their fill and couldn't find any money, they left the premises, leaving Thomas on the floor fighting for his life in horrific pain. On the way out, the gang left the door open. Thomas managed to gather his strength to reach for his phone and try to call the emergency services, but this was to no avail. The emergency operator answered, but Thomas made no response. The operator desperately tried to get Thomas to make a sound. However, this was just too much to ask. Thomas was left in a pool of blood and boiling water. Over the next few hours, he succumbed to his injuries and he passed away.
Damn,
10 hours later, a neighbour named Lee had set off for a bike ride at around 7:30 a.m. Lee noticed that Thomas's front door was open. Curious and concerned, he went to check. Lee was met with a scene that he will never forget: the lifeless and blooded body of Thomas Campbell. It was clear that he had been dead for some time and was subjected to horrific torture.
Yeah, my boy.
Lee phoned the emergency services and the police were soon on the scene.
Yo, okay, that is a little bit horrifying, bro. Boiling hot water on my balls, bro. Yo, I catch you lacking as a ghost, bro. I'm beating your ass, yo. You burn my kids? Oh, nah, bro. I'm haunting your ass forever, bro.
An investigation began. At first, the investigation was difficult, as there was no DNA on the premises from the perpetrators. Also, certain CCTV cameras were removed before the attack. The police visited Colleen to let her know that her ex-husband had been horrifically murdered. Despite hearing this tragic news, shockingly, she returned to work the very next day. At some point after the attack, John Belfield fled the country to South America and lived in Suriname. During the investigation, the police recovered a tracker that had been placed on Thomas's van, and before too long, the police were able to identify the murder vehicle used to get to and from Thomas's house. The police then tracked the movements of the van, which led them to Peak Forest, and at Peak Forest, they recovered several items from Thomas's house, including his wallet and driving license. But along with these items was the burned remains of a flask, along with a mobile phone. The mobile phone was analysed, and it was found that the phone had been used to operate the tracker on Thomas's car. The phone that was found was damning, as all of the text messages and calls were logged. It was clear soon to the police that John was the mastermind in this case and orchestrated the brutal end of Thomas's life. The police then realised that John had been in contact with Colleen and that the two had talked about taking revenge. The police then uncovered some CCTV footage which was captured at Colleen's property. With this footage and call data, the police realised that Colleen had taken a call from John just minutes before the brutal attack on Thomas. Her communication with John regarding Thomas's details and whereabouts was continuous. On the 13th of July, Colleen was arrested on suspicion of Thomas's murder.
Hell yeah.
According to reports, she was shaking visibly and was shocked and confused. She began telling officers that she still loved Thomas and had no reason to ever want him dead. She began telling the officers, "This is nothing to do with me." Stephen Cleworth was also arrested in connection to the murder due to his role in the planning. Reese Stephen was found to be at the scene of the crime and was also arrested. Following a 5-week trial, Stephen, Reese, and Colleen all pleaded not guilty to the charges, but a jury of their peers convicted them of conspiracy to robbery. Reese played a central role in the brutal attack and was also found guilty of murder. Stephen and Colleen were convicted of manslaughter, reflecting their lesser yet still significant roles in the crime. At Bolton Crown Court on the 22nd of February 2023, sentences were handed down. Reese Stephen received a life sentence with a minimum term of 37 years. This is an unusually long sentence compared to other murder cases in recent Manchester history. This reflects the level of brutality and premeditation. Stephen received a life sentence too, but with a minimum term of 12 years. Colleen Campbell was sentenced to 13 years and must serve a minimum sentence of 2/3 in prison for her role in the crime. But John Belfield, the alleged mastermind, remained at large for nearly a year later. The police thought that he had fled to Spain. However, he was recognized by law enforcement in South America. Upon his arrest, information regarding his whereabouts was shared with Manchester's police force, and he was subsequently flown back to Manchester to face the justice system. His trial is set for the 3rd of June 2025. Carl, the driver, was found to be unaware of the
so this is recent. Okay.
criminal activity, and he was not charged.
Thank God.
The other man on the unaware of the criminal activity, and he was not charged.
Thank God. The driver wasn't charged. I'm happy.
The other man on the job has still not been identified, despite all attempts by the forces to track down the final perpetrator. The family of Thomas Campbell was devastated by the brutal crime inflicted upon them. His brother
There was 5 guys. There was one in the car, and there was 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah, there's 5 guys.
Particular was enraged by the sentence handed down to Colleen Campbell, believing that it was far too lenient. In the days following Thomas's death, the family had initially taken Colleen in and supported her. They were totally unaware of her involvement. It later emerged that she had been harboring a terrible secret and was complicit in the brutal murder. Thomas's brother has since gained custody of the children, stepping in to care for them after the tragic loss of their father. None of the perpetrators involved in the murder appear to show genuine remorse, although reports suggest that Colleen broke down and cried in court. There remains uncertainty about whether her tears were out of guilt for Thomas, concern for the impact of her children, or simply self-pity in response to the consequences that she now faces.
Bro's a bitch, and she doesn't want to go to jail. That's simple as that. Anyways, if you guys enjoyed, like and subscribe. I'll see you guys in the next one.